NEPA stands for the National Environmental Policy Act, and this usually brings a set of environmental requirements that every state, DOT, transit agency, municipality has to carry out in order to receive what's called a finding of no significant impact, FONSI, or a record of decision from the sponsor agency, that there will be no significant environmental impacts to the local surrounding area or jurisdiction of where the project will happen once the asset is constructed. And often owners have to decide, or through the initial NEPA process, whether a project will go through what's called an environmental assessment, which usually takes about maybe a couple of years to complete, or an EIS, which is an environmental impact statement, which is much more rigorous. It takes much longer than an EA, and will usually involve the owner having to take a number of steps to remediate, to address certain environmental issues that are going to happen, whether you have to build over, let's say, a waterway, whether you're going to have to excavate a certain amount of land, whether you're going through an historic site, and you have to work with state historic preservation offices in order to address that. And when it comes to NEPA and delivering infrastructure, one issue that we have seen is that sometimes private sector contractors, they will often offer in design build something called an alternative technical concept, an ATC. And the problem though with ATCs is that depending on how it differs from the original project scope that was given a finding of no significant impact, that might trigger what's called an environmental reevaluation. And a public owner might put the onerous or the risk of having to satisfy the NEPA reevaluation efforts onto the contractor, even though they're offering an ATC that it could save the project money, it could expedite the project schedule. Every state here is different in that regard. Every state DOT has their own, let's say, rules and regulations when it comes to whether they put the risk on the private sector or not. But oftentimes, the NEPA process, when it comes to delivering infrastructure, the EIS component, just given the extensive length of time that it creates and the hurdles until you can have, let's say, shovel in the ground, that's where a lot of, I think, reform has been kind of geared towards, is how you can expedite the EIS process while still obtaining the necessary clearance and addressing all the important remedial steps that an agency needs to take in order to make sure that this project does not have any serious negative impacts on a local community. When it comes to old and outdated infrastructure, the reason why it's been on the books, I think, for so long is that many states are able to build up what's called a deferred maintenance budget, where they're able to essentially kick the can down the road and to address it at a later time. The reason you see this happening is the deferred maintenance accumulatively adds over a period of years, which turns into decades, and the cost to get to the same point ends up increasing, and you're not achieving anything else, anything additional, even though the cost of, let's say, rehabbing, whether it's from a runway to a certain interstate, you're getting to the same endpoint, but you haven't a much higher premium to pay because you've let the maintenance decrease and get worse and worse over a period of years. And I think we've gotten to a point where you have so many assets beyond their useful life, where you have states with such a high deferred maintenance backlog, but they don't have the budget internally to address it. We've kind of come to a head at this point, and that's where the reason why we want to see a large infrastructure bill passed, why we're starting to see a lot of local agencies look at alternative delivery methods in order to expedite some of this maintenance and larger capital programs. It's because of the internal funding requirements that a lot of public entities simply don't have at this time to address the backlog that they've been building over the course of many years.